Yes. Now, we just finished talking about Ben Affleck as Batman. Oh, so excited for him to return. And we name dropped Michael Keaton. But there's another cinematic Batman we have, and that is Robert Pattinson's Batman. So, now look, I'll be honest. Let's just be upfront. I was not, when I first watched The Batman, I was not a fan of it. I have watched it again, and it has grown on me. Like, I watched it when it came out on DVD. I was like, you know what? Knowing more what to expect, it was pretty good. It's not great. I'd still kind of put it in the bottom 3 for me. It was pretty good. So
yeah, I think it's better with rewatches too, honestly. I think I've seen it 3.5 times now.
Oh, yes. So did you watch Ave Marie all the times? Or did you fast forward past that?
You mean just the whole beginning part?
Yeah.
Usually the beginning part is when I'm like, going to get a snack and I'm listening to it in the background.
Maybe you'll dance as you make your popcorn. You dance like Joker in the Joker movie.
Yeah.
Just like, da da da, Ave Marie.
Yeah, I will say the first time it didn't strike me at all as being too long, but in subsequent watches, like, I don't think it's bad, but the movie, it truly could have just started with, like, you could have started somewhere else, but it could have just been like, bam, he gets killed. Yes. We're on to Batman going into the
Yes.
Yeah, that's all.
So one of the characters in the movie, which I have to remind myself of sometimes, is the Riddler, played by Paul Dano. So we found out, well, I don't know if we found it out here or if it was announced earlier, but Paul Dano talked about more about Riddler prequel comic he's writing called Riddler Year One, which anytime there's a DC book and says Year One, you gotta get excited. Also, there was a Spider-Man Year One by Dan Slott, who normally I'm not the biggest fan of, but he did a really great job with that one. So
nice.
He's writing Riddler Year One. So during Comic-Con, Paul Dano talked about how, to prepare for the role of the Riddler, he came up with a backstory of the character. And he talked to Matt Reeves, the director of the Batman, kind of like, oh, this is how I kind of see, the character's origin. And then Matt said to him, that should be a comic. And then later, when talking to Paul Dano, Matt said, hey, DC wants to talk to you about turning your idea into a comic, which I love. I always love hearing like people who work in like outside of like either comic book shows or comic book movies getting into the comic book medium. We recently had Kevin Conroy write a story for DC Pride, and Dreamer, the actress who played Dreamer in Supergirl, Nicole Maines, wrote a story in DC Pride as well. So I always love seeing people, actors, creators, get into the comic book medium. And so Paul Dano talked about how in the story, it's going to kind of give the origin story about how he was this lonely accountant type character and how he became the Riddler, basically his origin story. So for me, I'm like, no, look, one of my biggest criticisms of the film, even when I watched it again, I was like, okay, it was pretty good the second time, was I'm not a fan of this version of the Riddler. I think that the Riddler needed a little more backstory just to give him a little extra oomph, but the way he's describing this comic does sound very interesting. And I think maybe if you kind of have it in the back of your head, it could improve the film. Like, I read recently the Before the Batman prequel book, which I don't know how it will probably contradict the other the comic because I doubt Paul Dano is going to be like, all right, gotta make sure this lines up with this junior novelization that came out. I doubt that's going to happen. But I was reading it, and I was like, this makes the Riddler character better in the movie because it talks about how the orphanage that Riddler grew up in was in former Wayne Manor because Thomas Wayne moved the family to Wayne Tower. And there's a picture of Bruce Wayne and his parents and Edward in the orphanage group hating Bruce Wayne. And when Bruce's parents were killed, was so just jealous of how, like, there's a manor full of orphans and no one cares about us, but Bruce Wayne, everyone cares about. So that book was very good. Anyone who liked the movie or whatever should go check it out. I highly recommend Before the Batman. So I think that adding a little bit of backstory, number one, would help the film, that version of the Riddler. But number two, from what we've already had the origin, again, I think it'll contradict. Sounds like it could be very cool, especially set in Matt Reeves' version of Gotham City. And I assume Riddler was obsessed with Batman, so we should be able to at least see Batman from Riddler's point of view, either on TV or something. Or maybe Batman saves him from a mugging, and that's what gets him obsessed. So I think that even though I'm not the biggest fan of the movie, I think this sounds really cool. So what do you think about Riddler Year One, even though you have not read Batman Year One?
Yeah, I will.
Someday.
Eventually. I will. Also, I mean, I have this now, so I have to...
yes, Halloween!
So
where'd you
now
get
you have
that?
another thing. I'm actually borrowing it.
Oh.
But I'm going...
So that one, and in, for sure. All right, got to
now I have incentive before I give this back, which otherwise I'll be a jerk. I have to read Year One and then this.
Yes, and then
now I have an incentive now, at least. But I have fire under me to at least get through Year One in Long Halloween. But obviously, I love everything about this. I'd have to look again, but this could be like the coolest bit of news that you've presented to me, because first of all, I just like the Batman a lot, but contrary, I love this version of the Riddler. I would have liked a lot more backstory. There was too much going on in this movie. Although I would recommend, like, everything you just described to a T was described in the movie. The whole, like, I was an orphan, and when Bruce Wayne became an orphan, everyone felt so bad for the billionaire orphan.
Well, I almost think there's a difference between exposition and showing it.
You're right, and that's that's like they kind of had to just breeze through it in dialogue in the movie. This is going to give a lot more emotional weight to it than just kind of being like kind of saying it all in dialogue and then having to extrapolate the emotions behind it because of how it was explained. This would bring a lot more emotion to it and definitely improve the movie version. But just in concept, at least, this is such a cool version of the Riddler, at least to my taste. And it would be, if any character was going to, get a really in-depth, backstory, understanding this version of the Riddler is probably my dream comic. So, very excited.
Though, when you say that, I will disagree with you on your last point. Because if any character was going to get an extended kind of origin story, I personally would rather it be the Penguin.
Between the Penguin having his own backstory comic, or the Riddler having his own backstory comic, I think just the type of story that the Riddler one would be is more interesting to me. And that's about it, because, you know, I don't know if I'm as interested in like the mafia drug lord kind of story, but
Though he is getting his own show, Penguin. Although I don't think it's an origin story.